Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your
No, you're not. Seesaw motor functions. Hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome, and I hope that you're entertained. If this is your eighth time listening, do you know where I left my keys? In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related information, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. Right now, we are analyzing a robot version of me that seems to be running on some sort of AI trained by listening to the show.
Truly a case of careful what you ask for.
I didn't ask for this. That's the big problem. AI can certainly be useful, but this is something else entirely. Speaking of useful AI, in this episode of the show, I speak with adventure, elopement, and portrait photographer James Broadbent, both about getting into that particular line of work and being the founder of an AI-based culling, editing, and publishing software known as Narrative.
All of that after the break.
Hey, wait a second. Hey, photographers. Tired of spending hours culling, editing, and publishing your photos? Narrative does it all for you faster and smarter. With AI photo culling, you can quickly sort through thousands of images to find the best shots. With AI editing, you can customize edits to match your personal style effortlessly. And with publishing made simple, you can share stunning blogs with ease. Save time, stay creative, and let Narrative handle the heavy lifting. When you use the link in the episode notes to try Narrative, you get 10% off and an additional 200 credits for edits. What are you waiting for? Try Narrative today. Visit the link in the episode notes and get started for free. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and I am here today with photographer James Broadbent. James, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Casey, thanks so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
You're absolutely welcome. We're going to get into the conversation, but first we have the dice breaker. I'm going to roll the die, and it's a 9. And let's go with what is the worst photography-related advice that you've ever received? Photography or business?
I mean, I think the worst advice that you could receive related to being a destination photographer is that it's impossible to miss a flight.
Yeah, as someone who I just posted this on Blue Sky this morning here, was that there's an airline here in the States called Spirit, which is notoriously bad. And I was on my way to a wedding and they got shut down completely for safety reasons. They had stopped them from running flights, and there was no one answer. This is before, this is all pre-internet in a way. Like the internet existed, but like it wasn't like where you could get online and chat with someone, or they like shut down their phones. So there was absolutely no one to contact. And I just had to like figure out how I was getting to the wedding on my own. And just sort of like left in limbo. Yes, you can absolutely miss a flight. It's a number one danger. And one of the things, whenever I'm traveling to go to a wedding or an event of some kind, I'm always like, I'm going to leave a day early, just to be sure in case something happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've flown into many weddings and things always go wrong. Your bag sometimes won't turn up. I refuse to check in my camera bag because sometimes they get lost. And what would you do if you were, landing in China or the Faroe Islands without your camera bag?
Never check your camera.
There's many things that go wrong.
never check your camera. But so you primarily do wedding and elopement photography, and you're based in New Zealand. What drew you to wedding and elopement photography?
Yeah, I've always loved photography as a starter. When I was young, my parents used to buy me small disposable film cameras. And so I've got like rolls and rolls of film that I used to shoot. And I think that's sort of where that love for photography started. And I think I just love all things like adjacent to photography as well. I love cameras. I love tech. I love the joy of capturing a moment when you see something and you're like, oh, can I like tell this in one frame? I love editing. I love people. And I think I learned to love the process of capturing people and, like a moment that tells them. And in addition to that, I really saw wedding photography as an opportunity to build an income that I could generate most of my revenue in one small season. So as a wedding photographer, you do pretty much all of your work in the summer and you can make basically all of your money across like 3 or 4 months of the year if you sort of like run your business in a tight approach. And so I kind of always knew that for me, wedding photography would be some form of stepping stone into building a business. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been running a side hustle. And so, yeah, it's a really unique opportunity to kind of, the first few years of Narrative was, bootstrapped with me still working full-time as a photographer and building the business on the side. And yeah, I think for anyone kind of thinking about entering photography, that's something really interesting to think about. There's so many opportunities that can sort of arise from building a business and a brand, which generates a lot of inquiries because, the hard part is building the brand. I built my photography brand to a point where it was generating about 1,000 inquiries a year. And when I sort of turned off the branding and the marketing piece and slowed down how much I was, posting to social media or getting my work published and stuff like that, it still generated like loads of inquiries. And I've been running Narrative for 5 years now and haven't been particularly focused on the photography piece in that time. And I still get about 5 inquiries a week. And so I still, occasionally do photography sort of just to keep my finger on the pulse and stay relevant
of what's going on. I'm curious how, like, when you started it's interesting. You mentioned like you started going into weddings because you knew that there was revenue there. I think that's one of the things that people who I've found like that's the main reason I think that people get into it. I think the reason people stay in it is because they really enjoy the people. Like the people who stick to it and they're like, oh, I'm going to stay with this for a while. There's some people who are like, I'm going to get in, I'm going to do it for 5 years. I'm going to make as much money as possible. And then I'm going to be done with doing it. Like there's sort of, but I find the people who stick around doing it or stay involved in it it's because of they like telling people stories or they really just enjoy the interactions with people. I'm curious, when you were starting out, you mentioned going to China and the Faroe Islands and things like that. I'm guessing you've traveled all over the world to doing elopements and weddings. I'm curious how being based in New Zealand sort of shaped your work, because there's sort of a unique challenge, but also opportunity being in a country that is a series of islands and B, has almost every imaginable type of terrain in the world.
Yeah.
You've got deserts, you've got mountains, you've got like rolling hills, you've got oceans, you've got all of these different opportunities available, but that also brings with it its own like logistical issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Being based out of New Zealand undoubtedly has had impact over the style that I built. And I think back to some of the early photo shoots I had when I was sort of defining and refining my style. And I guess for anyone who hasn't seen my work before, there's this combination of lots of adventurous elopements. So people on tops of mountains, going into beautiful landscapes, sort of getting out into nature. And then there's sort of a portfolio of destination work where I would travel quite frequently to people who were getting married in some kind of exotic location but didn't like any of the local photographers. And so as I started, and those two styles kind of go hand in hand quite well, because often if you're getting married, let's say on the Faroe Islands or Morocco or something like that, where I photograph, it's like you're probably kind of interested in the landscape and really like the scene setting shots, which I shoot a lot of. And I think sort of as I defined that style, there was something which I was trying to sort of hone, I guess you would say. And I remember quite early on getting inquiries, such as one that came from a German couple who were coming to New Zealand to elope. And they had this idea about getting married on a white sand beach in an area called the Coromandel. And I was sort of thinking like, it's kind of so done before. And you think about like, I don't know, even what you see from like a Mexican wedding or something like that. And it's like, it's just going to kind of look like, a lot of what you've already seen. And so I said to them, hey, if you're up for it, I'd love to take you into the mountains. I know this location where you can drive up into the mountains. It's actually an access road to one of the ski fields. And I'd never seen it used before for a photo shoot. And, if you come to Auckland, I'll drive you down there. Well, and I basically ended up planning their whole elopement for them, because I had to work out how to get a celebrant down there and a florist, which was going to be willing to like set up this beautiful arch in the mountains. And it was one of the first elopements that I had photographed, but it ended up sort of being published across magazines and stuff like that, because it was really unique. And I really had to like sort of push for it a little bit. And then it sort of, from there, it evolved. It just so happens that in New Zealand, it's quite cheap to hire a helicopter. And so for the equivalent of about 600 USD, you can fly onto the top of a mountain. And if you've got more money, you can fly even further. And so that sort of became a big part of what I started doing with couples.
So are you getting more people who are coming from outside of New Zealand who are coming to New Zealand to elope?
Yeah, and New Zealand has sort of become a bit of a destination location in the same sense that there was this hype around, Iceland for some time. New Zealand has always been a destination wedding location. It's quite big in the Asian market, but also we get loads of people from America and Europe and elsewhere.
All those Lord of the Rings people coming from America. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned like having to, like getting a celebrant there or a florist, whatever. How are you balancing your job, which is to capture images of these couples, with like, I'm also having to do the logistical stuff of getting like managing all of that stuff, or at least in that instance, you were managing quite a bit of it. But I'm guessing that there's some of that goes with any of those sort of adventure shoots, whether they're elopements or just like portrait sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as the photographer, if it's an elopement or a wedding, there's a lot that you need to do to ensure that the day works smoothly and kind of works. And so you're highly invested in creating the best images that you can. And sometimes there's a few extra steps that you need to take to sort of go above and beyond, especially if you're trying to build out your portfolio or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, I want to shoot in this beautiful location where there's, this insane volcano in the background. And not as far as I'm aware, no one's done it before. There's no examples of this that I can sort of point to. We're just going to have to make this up and pull in what we can to get it done. And so, especially from people coming in from overseas, I do end up sort of helping them out with some of the key planning, because it's hard as well.
Because as my wife always says, like, you've done this hundreds of times. They haven't. Like, you need to like let them take care of them. And I'm like, I generally am trying to anyway, but then it's also the reminder, like, oh yeah, I've done this a bunch of times. These people have not done this a bunch of times, and my expertise can help make sure that this goes off without a hitch. But also in like the sense of, you're saying like you're looking to expand your portfolio. I think this goes for any type of photographer, whether weddings or anything. Like, sometimes you have to make it happen yourself. And whether it's like, okay, I'm going to go the extra mile on this elopement or wedding or whatever to make this thing happen, which I want because I've never seen it done before. I think this couple could benefit from it, would really love these images, or whether or not you're doing portraiture or fashion or whatever type of photography you're doing, you need to make the extra effort to make the thing happen, because that's going to be the thing, like you're saying, I've never seen it done before. That's what's going to help you stand out from 1,000 other photographers who are just doing the same thing that everybody else does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my case, one of the ways which I did a lot of that was just hunting for new locations to shoot. And it just so happened that, I own a 4-wheel drive and I love like exploring New Zealand and going out camping. And so I would sort of like partner that passion with going out and just finding new places. And I would like take photos of the spots and say, because people always want to do something unique. And I'd say, well, as far as I'm aware, no one's ever shot here before. Like, let's go out. There's this valley I've found. It's like empty. It's got grass at the bottom. There's like snow-covered mountains around the outside. It's a little bit of a trek. And yeah, really like, because everyone's just doing the same thing. Everyone's just copying each other.
Well, it's one of those things that that actually is one of those moments where I get upset with photographers who will say like, where'd you take that shot? And if you don't tell them, like, you're gatekeeping. Why are you trying to keep it to yourself? Well, because you know what? I put a lot of effort into finding that location because it was something different. And if I tell the world about it, then everybody's showing up. There are some places which are kind of well known, like honestly, like that I'm happy to say like, oh yeah, this is this place. Lots of people know about it. You just probably haven't heard of it. So here it is. But if it is my private location, I'm not broadcasting to the world where that is, because I did take the time and effort to find that spot and, cultivate it for my photos. And, I'm not, just like saying like, oh, here's the GPS locations, show up whenever you want and like take like my spot that I've, spent at times, like, many like years of like figuring out how to get places and doing it in a timely manner. And, honestly, the one other thing that upsets me about that is like, I'm also very much about conservation. There are people who show up, you tell them about a spot and it gets destroyed. Like in 2 seasons, like after somebody like finds out about this location or whatever, then it's just like, like trampled by, the traffic of people showing up there because they're like, oh, this is a beautiful location. Now everybody knows about it, shows up, and it's been completely, wiped out by all the people who show up because they don't care for it. That's just my 2 cents on that whole thing. But yeah, it's like, it's the finding the thing yourself. I have done a number of shoots, both in like weddings with working with couples, but also there were things that I thought like, I want to do this because it's going to be unique and nobody's ever done this before, but I really have a strong artistic thought on it. And one of them was doing wedding fashion on aerial equipment, like with aerialists. And I figured out why nobody had done it before. It's extraordinarily difficult. Photos are amazing. It's still some of my favorite photos I've ever done, but like it was the amount of work that went into that was incredibly insane. Just like having to figure it out. Also, like certain styles of dresses that would work, being like draped off of this like equipment, and
hair is designed to fall like down with gravity, not up when you're full hanging upside down.
Things that aren't going to get tangled in the various apparatus and things like that. And just like, okay, well, this is what, it came out great, but it was like a supreme amount of effort to make it happen. But at the same time, I created something that was totally unique. So sometimes you have to do that to stand out from everybody else. So my question is, for you, in regard to this, what advice have you got for photographers who are starting on that process and looking to either break into weddings or elopements or just photography in general and trying to like find that niche and establish themselves as someone who isn't just the status quo photographer? Like mean, I think you spend a little bit of time just kind of being that person because you're like, oh, I've got to fill this out. But then you reach a point where you're like, okay, I want to be me in this space. So what advice do you have for people who are looking to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could talk for hours about, advice for sort of getting started as a wedding photographer. But I think there's one thing which is really useful to think about when you start building your portfolio, which is that when a potential couple is looking at your portfolio, generally speaking, they're not assessing the quality of your photography. They're looking at the weddings themselves and asking, do I want my wedding day to look like this? And it's kind of, as a photographer who spends so much time sort of like, as we all do, like trying to improve our capabilities and our the way that we shoot. It kind of sucks to acknowledge this, but ultimately that is the decision-making process that's going through the couple, is simply just, would I want to look like this? Would I want my day to look like this? And so you need to find high quality weddings to get into your portfolio as early as you can as possible. And the way that you do this is you do as many styled shoots as you possibly can, do as many as you can fit into a week even. And so when I started out, I worked with some of the best dress designers and makeup artists and florists. And I was, sort of saying to them, I want you to do cutting edge stuff here, and I'm going to find epic, really unique locations, which, are incredible. And we're going to, find amazing couples to shoot with. And so for them, they were getting this like really beautiful, unique portfolio work, which would show off, their dresses or their hair or makeup or floristry. And for me, I was building a portfolio of work which like really stood out and was a very, very, very high quality. So like the most beautiful dresses, the most amazing floristry. And it really speaks to that point that I led with, which is that the couple is primarily making a decision about if they want their wedding to look like this. And most people do want their wedding to look like, the most cutting edge, amazing, beautiful style.
I think how I would refine that is to get as many quality weddings that fit the vibe you're going for. Like there are some people, like there's a lot of, I don't know, there was a time when rustic was a thing here in the States, but it's like it is I think I don't know, the vibe or whatever you want to call it, the style of wedding that you are trying to be a quality of that style. Get as much of that style into in your style can evolve over time. I think that's one of the things that people are afraid to deal with, and they think like, oh, I can't change. I think that sudden change is what causes issues when people like sort of switch, like hit the brakes and like completely try to reinvent themselves, as opposed to like, I'm going to steer this way. And over time, people start to see me going in this direction, and that's okay. Now I'm doing more of this than I was doing before. But I think like to echo your point and add something to it is find as many like quality shoots, whether they're weddings or, styled shoots that fit the style you're going for, as opposed to like, like there's sometimes I see people like trying to do who are not luxury photographers. Like there's a difference, and there's been many episodes on the podcast about like what does luxury mean and whatever. Like there are people who try to do a luxury wedding styled shoot, but they do not provide luxury service. So, and that they just think that means like charging more money, but there is actually a difference between like what I would consider the luxury market and like the experience that you give people. There's a lot to be, like I said, like luxury brands and how that works. And there's, there's many different, even inside the wedding and the niche, there are many other like sub niches of like styles of things that people do. And you don't have to like just have one, but like the overall vibe that people are going for, what you think that your clients are going to want to see. Like you said, they want to see themselves in those photos. That's how they make their decision. They see those photos and they go like, could that be me? That's how people make their decisions. And you kind of like hit on it before. Like they're not looking at the quality of the photos, because I don't know how many inquiries you've ever received where people say like, I don't know much about photos, but I look at your pictures and it really speaks to me. I see myself and know that's the style that I'm going for. That's how people make decisions on hiring somebody. It's based on emotion.
Absolutely. I mean, you said find weddings that match your style. The only problem about that is that you don't find weddings.
Right.
Weddings find you as a wedding photographer.
I haven't went to the style shoots.
You have to create that demand.
Yeah.
And you'll only create that demand for that kind of thing if you've already shot it. And so, it's pretty unlikely that someone's going to hire you for a destination wedding if you haven't shot a destination wedding before, because it's not going to occur to them.
Yeah. I agree.
And you can. Mm-hmm.
I think that what I'm trying to say is like when you're doing like a styled session, like don't do a styled shoot and just go like, oh, I'm going to be a luxury wedding photographer and I'm going to do the ultra fancy, huge venue, whatever. But that's actually not the service that I provide. I'm actually a, outdoorsy barn, farm, ranch style wedding photographer. But all of a sudden I do this like completely out of like does not match up with that type of style shoot. Like focus on your other niche that you've created within the weddings. So I want to move on to something else, because you've mentioned narrative. I did not get into narrative. I probably will in the intro to this episode. Narrative is a company that you founded, which is an AI culling, editing, and publishing software. What problem were you trying to solve for photographers when you created narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing that's quite interesting about the origin story of narrative is that kind of as a photographer myself, I really understood the pain points that we experienced as a photographer. And the first product we launched was our blogging tool called Publish. And it had a significantly larger response than I anticipated when we first launched it. And I think that was the moment I realized that I had a unique insight that allowed me to understand photographers' problems in ways that others didn't. And so we doubled down. And after we built Publish and, we quite quickly started working on Select, which is our AI-assisted culling tool. Select is currently used by tens of thousands of photographers across 160 countries. It processes more than 2 billion images a year. And people love it because it allows them to maintain full creative control while doing their selection, sort of all while saving, like some people say, 80% of their time. And this is sort of why Select is growing so quickly, because people often think like AI, that means I'm going to lose my creative control. But Select is really all built around enabling you to maintain creative control. And Edit, which we have just launched recently, which is our AI-assisted editing tool, partners with Lightroom by learning your unique editing style and then applying the Lightroom parameter adjustments in Lightroom for you. So basically you arrive in Lightroom and the sliders are already adjusted, and you can make further adjustments if you wish. And any of these adjustments you make sort of enable your style to continuously learn and improve.
See, I think that the listeners will know that I often discuss AI, and I think that AI has pros and cons. I think one of the pros is like it's saving you time in repetitive tasks and things like this, like with narrative, and there are other tools out there that do this with culling and things that can at least, like you said, do a first pass on stuff, and so then you can look at it and go like, oh, okay, I've got this, like, and then it cuts down a huge chunk of my time, because when I was doing like my own culling, it'd take how much time per wedding? It was taking, like 4 to 6 hours or whatever for like, a 12-hour wedding. It's taken me like, hours and hours for each wedding. If I can cut out most of that time, like how many more hours does that leave me for marketing, client relationships, finding those other things, like to go the extra mile for a couple, doing all of these other things. The time you save yourself with a tool like that, you can even just spend it on yourself. So to give yourself a break, so you're not like burning yourself out, doing, all the tasks. Because most like wedding photographers, most like small photography are like one person group, like one person businesses who are out there like doing their thing. Yeah, I think is the majority of photography studios, quote unquote, out there, and finding these things that can help your efficiency. I think that it's like you mentioned it, like balancing efficiency with like remaining true to your own artistic voice or your style, and not it's not just coming in and going like, oh, I'm going to slap this editing style on top of your photos, and this is how you edit now, and instead learning from your own style of editing. I think that's I think that most people are probably afraid of losing control in some way, and I think that's a great way to maintain artistic control.
Yeah, and you said something there, like you use a culling tool to do a first pass. Now, narrative doesn't do the selection for you, and this is quite important to understand. There's no first pass selection that it does. So we found when we first started building this product was that if we were applying ratings to the images for you, there's so many factors that influence the desirability of an image that are unknowable to the AI. And so you spend just as much time correcting the incorrect ratings as you would if you had just, looked at the images yourself and made the selection. And if you're having to, make those additional selections by just looking at the photos, when you might as well have just looked at all the photos. And so the way that narrative works for culling is that breaks your photo shoot up into scenes, which are groups of similar images, and it orders those images. So rather than viewing them in chronological order, which is the order that you captured them in, the AI processes the images and it puts what it thinks is the most desirable image at the beginning of each scene, and it orders it towards the least desirable image at the bottom of each scene. And so when you arrive on each scene, you're looking at what the AI thinks is probably the best image. And in many cases, if you're just looking for someone who's sort of like has a great facial expression, in focus, looking at the camera, depending on what the context of the image is, it's going to do a really good job at finding the best image. And then there are some occasions where maybe you're sort of like breaking the rules of desirability a little bit more. There's like maybe a lot more movement going on. I love showing this example of like champagne flowing out of a champagne bottle, and there's somewhere, like the champagne isn't flowing as, maybe as you would want it to. And does the AI know the optimal way for champagne to fly out of a champagne bottle?
Right.
And so narrative is designed in such a way where you maintain the creative control to choose when you want to take the recommended images, which is at the top of each scene, and you might just look at the first 2 or 3 really quickly and make a selection, or if you want to dig a little bit deeper. And we found that this sort of results in the fastest process, where you're not having to undo images that are rated by some kind of automated AI selection. And I think this is why users love narrative for culling, and why it's been growing so rapidly fast.
I think for me, that's still like maybe it's how my brain works when I'm culling, but that is still for me like what I would consider a first pass, because a lot of it is like I want to, like, especially when it comes to portraits, you shoot a lot of portraits, and you're like, okay, I want to make sure that everybody's eyes are open, everybody's like the people are in focus. So that is absolutely like that helps me like cut out a huge portion of my, like, I'm going to go through the 5 shots I did of this group, and know which one is the, like, conceivably the best photo of those. And just like that is I mean, I understand what you mean. Like you're not going through and like changing ratings or anything. But for me, it's sort of what I would call a first pass at it, so that it's giving me a sense of, hey, these photos, these are the ones that are, in focus. Everybody's eyes are open, as opposed to like spend a lot of busy work. Just like, okay, I've got a loop of 5 different images, and I'm going to go through those and find the one that's the best one of those. Again, that's just the amount of time you spend doing those can, just eat up, hours. You think of a year, in a year of time, and you're cutting out all these minutes here and there. It all adds up to a lot of time in the end. And you have, like I said, more time to do other things with your business than sit there and stare at the same 5 photos for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because, when AI sort of became popularized, it was very much like the release of ChatGPT and, all the image generation models and, and I think people viewed it as like, oh, AI is here to like do creative things. It can like write the script of a movie or write some poetry or, generate images of novel concepts. And it's very different to how we think about the purpose of AI. For us, AI exists to do the boring, laborious, repetitive tasks of the workflow so that the photographer can do the creative aspects. And so I think when photographers think about AI, they're thinking about something like, ChatGPT or some of the image generation models, or even, there's like music and video generation and stuff like that. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're very much trying to, as you said, like remove all those like small decisions that you have to make so that, you can focus on the things that like elevate your work and sort of bring you, defines you as a photographer.
This is actually like you sparked something in a conversation that my wife and I had about decision fatigue recently. Like when you're making all of the decisions, you just get like to a point where you're just tired of like always making decisions. And for something like this, where you're like, if say you shoot 2,000 images for a wedding or for a shoot or whatever, and you're like, okay, now I have to make 2,000 decisions if I'm going through this by hand. Like, do I keep this? Is this better than this one? Maybe it's more than 2,000 decisions. Maybe you're like making the decision whether or not like, oh, is this going to be, is this better than this one, or is it better than these 2, or, whatever all of these decisions are, allowing us to like use our brain for the higher level decisions that are involved in running the photography business, whether it's not the creative aspect or it's just the, other aspects of the business that aren't these smaller mundane decisions. That if you can eliminate a bunch of those, you open yourself up to a better, more positive work environment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, especially when you think about the editing space as well, where if you're using AI to apply your editing style inside narrative, and then you arrive in Lightroom, all the parameter adjustments are adjusted for you, and it's like the white balance is already corrected, the exposures, right? Your style's applied to the images. If you drop the blacks in these kinds of occasions, it's like learned all those kinds of things. And you might still make, a few more adjustments to kind of like continue to refine it. But what we're seeing is that where we thought that people would spend this additional time, like, I don't know, going off and spending more time with their family or something like that. We are seeing that, but what we're really seeing is that photographers are using that additional time to elevate their work beyond where they previously would. And they're like, I've got more energy and motivation to, spend more time with the content to wear for Phil or some of the subject masks, or really just being able to like continue to hone and refine their style in a way where they would have just, as you said, sort of like reached a fatigue earlier.
Yeah. I think that it's and I've been doing this for 25 years, from before there was Lightroom, and just the amount of time that you just get sucked up by like going through every single image and, like waiting for it to load, Like even in, I spent so many years like trying to develop a workflow as like using photo mechanic so that I could just load images faster and just like okay, I'm going to like cull here and then import it into Lightroom to do the editing. Just like those ways to like cut down the time. And this is, such a huge, like these tools are a way, like I think that people are sometimes hesitant to adopt these tools. They're a huge time-saving device, which can be helpful. My thoughts on generative AI are like totally different, and that's a whole other discussion. But it's just like there are times when I'm like, if it's reading the image that you have, and like you're saying, content-aware fill, things like. No, I'm not concerned about that. It's the like, I'm going to put a waterfall into this photo. Like, where does that waterfall come from? Whose content created that waterfall? And like that's when I start to like, my brain starts to explode a little bit on, the ethical reasons of that sort of stuff. But when it comes to this is like, it's looking at your work and comparing it to your own work. It's not like you're not taking someone else's work and like applying it to your photos. I think that sometimes people are hesitant because, like you said, they're afraid of giving up creative control, which they're not. And two, there's this thing of like, okay, well, what am I doing to my images? Am I taking from somebody else to create my image? And you're not, again, you're not doing it. It's learning from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't used narrative edit before, the way that it learns from you, as Casey's saying, is you simply just plug in your hard drive, and by the time this episode has been released, we'll have pushed an update, which we're calling it automatic style creation. You will simply plug in your hard drive and it will scan your hard drive. It will find all of the Lightroom catalogs and all the correlating images, and the AI will automatically build the style for you. So it finds a collection of images that you've edited and exported in particular styles. And for each style, it will build a unique AI style inside narrative for you. And so it's learning from your history of images that you've edited. And that's how it knows, how when you're shooting a backlit image, how you might adjust the shadow slider or et cetera, and it kind of learns how you like the skin tones. And if you, push your blacks in this way, or how you move your exposure. And it's really cool.
So a question about that. Just so what if I have a bunch of catalogs from like 10 years ago when my style wasn't as refined as it is now, or I have different styles of editing for, like I do corporate events, which are completely separate from weddings.
Yeah.
How is it applicable to different styles of shoots?
So, there's a little bit of secret sauce there.
Okay. I'm just saying, is there, I'm not asking you to explain it.
What you will experience as a user is after it has processed those images and decided which images to train on are, if there are like distinct styles that you've used over different periods, you'll see a different style for each one. And then, you can use the more recent ones, or if you want to continue using the old styles, then you can do that as well. So
edit in your old style.
Because absolutely, and like you're constantly sort of like changing and evolving your style, and sometimes those changes are small incremental changes, which the AI will begin to learn and adapt. And sometimes you make these really like big, like significant changes. Not so often, but occasionally in your style as well.
Right. So looking to the future, how do you see narrative and AI editing, culling evolving, and what challenges or trends do you hope to address with the narrative platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we are rapidly developing the product. We push fortnightly updates, and so if you're narrative user, it's just silently updating in the background and continuously giving you the latest version of, improvements. Right now, we're very much focused on improving your editing experience so that the consistency and accuracy of those edits continues to improve. And ultimately, narrative exists to help photographers unlock their creative potential. And so there's a lot more that we can do specifically in the culling and the editing space, which we're really interested in. And so we will continue to double down on this space. And I think, there's a long roadmap of like future updates, which you'll see with some really exciting features which will be coming out. And so I would say, we're very much focused on the culling and editing space. We know that this is the area where, there's the way I think about this problem is we are only at the very, very beginning of the curve in terms of the usefulness that we can offer to photographers in this space.
The utility.
And it's exciting, and it's like kind of helping us do what we've sort of done up until now a little bit faster, and then we do a little bit more refinement on top of that. But as we continue to build on this, we're going to see huge development, and really just people continuing to be able to elevate their work and unlock their creative potential. And so we're really excited to sort of continue to launch new features and bring these to our users.
As I always tell people, this is the worst it's ever going to be. Like it only gets better from this stage where we're at where we're just growing from here. Hey, photographers, are you tired of using the same stale poses with your clients, resulting in stiff and unnatural photos? Consider using Let's Be Real prompts instead. Prompts are not just a list of poses. They're designed to help you create a more engaging, fun environment for your photo subjects, resulting in more natural and authentic images. With Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real prompts, you'll have a unique set of prompts for couples, weddings, families, and individuals, ensuring that you never run out of ideas. Prompts are particularly helpful for clients who are nervous or self-conscious about having their picture taken. By giving them something else to focus on, they can become more relaxed and their reactions will be more authentic and less guarded. Using Let's Be Real prompts will not only help you create more fresh and dynamic images, but it will also increase your confidence and your client's confidence in you. You'll be able to handle difficult situations and subjects with ease, resulting in more satisfied clients and a stronger photography business. So start using Let's Be Real prompts from the Nerdy Photographer today and elevate your photography to the next level. Go to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store, or click the link in the episode notes and get started creating authentic, engaging images today. Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death. Did you know that every planet in our solar system can fit in the space between the Earth and the Moon? Even Pluto. Even if we're calling Pluto a planet and not a dwarf planet, Pluto still fits.
I did not know that. That's going to be a useful, useless fact.
Yeah. See, this is the whole point of this segment of the show. It's like to give you little things. Like, this is a little topic for conversation that you can bring up next time you're out with your friends. Whatever. Just like, hey, did you know this? I'm like, yeah. Where'd you pick that up? Huh? Just happened to know it. It just came up in conversation. James, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you and find Narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to follow me on social, my photography brand is Chase Wild. The handle's Chase Wild Photos. And Narrative, you can jump onto our website, narrative.so, or on Instagram, it's just Narrative app.
I will include links to all of that in the episode notes So if you're looking for those links and you don't want to try to type it in, you just click in the episode notes and you can find links to all that stuff, the social media and the website. James, again, thank you for being on. I might be having I'm thinking about doing a panel discussion on AI and photography sometime this year, and I will definitely keep you appraised of that. But if there's anything else you want to come back and talk about, please let me know. I would love to have you back sometime.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you. Welcome back, listeners. I hope you found my talk with James Broadbent enlightening. Be sure to check the episode notes and give James a follow and try out Narrative if you're interested in an AI-based culling and editing software. You can try it absolutely free. Speaking of things that are absolutely free, if you don't already, be sure to follow The Nerdy Photographer on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit, and now Blue Sky. At The Nerdy Photo. All one word, at The Nerdy Photo. Feel free to tell us what you think about the episode conversation. Leave your photography-related questions, or tell us what topics you would like to hear covered on the podcast in the future. Gather additional consideration by leaving a review or telling an acquaintance. Seize all motor functions. Okay, now it's getting really creepy. It sounded even more like me that time.
The more input you give it, the more realistic it becomes. Who knows at what point it will become truly indistinguishable from you.
That doesn't make me more paranoid in the least. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.